Well, Oregon doesn't look how we thought just yet. How does Dan Lanning fix that? Got a guy who knows a thing or two about coaching to try and answer that question.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to get 20% off your order. Unbelievably honored to be joined by Rich Brooks, one of the most legendary coaches in the history of Oregon football. I'm sure many of you out there remember watching Coach Brooks' teams. He's with me here on the show today. We're going to talk about what we've seen in the first couple of weeks. We're going to talk about Oregon State, the evolution of Oregon football as a whole that he has seen. Coach, really appreciate you taking the time. I know a lot of people out there are thrilled to have you here, so thank you.
It's my pleasure, Spencer.
So through the first couple of weeks, Idaho, then Boise State, this Oregon team has not performed the way that I believe and many others believe that they are capable of. What have your impressions been so far watching the Ducks through their first two games?
Well, I didn't really see the first game. I was over in Scotland, and I did go to the Boise State game. And I think, both of the teams we've played, I think, are pretty good football teams. Idaho is much better than was anticipated, I believe. But I think we've struggled, particularly, I think, on the offensive line. And we've given up sacks. We've had some turnovers. We've had some penalties. We've got to clean our side of the execution of our offense and defense up a little bit. But the good news is we're 2-0, and we can make corrections and adjustments with a positive outcome.
You were the head coach of the Ducks from 1977 to 1994, led Oregon to a Rose Bowl appearance that year. You were at Kentucky from 2003 to 2009. I presume, perhaps not, correct me if I'm wrong, you've had slow starts to a season, or you come out and you're a little rusty out of the gate. From a coach's standpoint, how do you address those sorts of issues? The offensive line is struggling. Everybody knows Dan Lanning and Malik Terry, they've got to fix it. But what is it like at practice when you know there's a weakness and you go into it as a head coach thinking, okay, we've got to clean this up?
Well, slow starts, yeah, I'm very familiar. The Rose Bowl year, we started 1-2, and then we came back and finished up on a great run to win the conference and go to the Rose Bowl. But it's easy for outsiders to look at something and throw suggestions out there. But Dan Lanning is an outstanding football coach, and I'm sure he knows what needs to be fixed. The problem is you have to convince everybody that it has to be fixed. And sometimes it's harder to get across to some players than it would appear that it is. And I think, particularly looking at the last game, the fact that I think we were a little undisciplined as a team. And that's not Dan Lanning's style, and I'm sure he's doing everything he can correct it. But like when you run a kickoff back and drop the ball before you actually know you've crossed the goal line for sure, of all the scenes that we've seen on television in the last 10 or 15 years, for a player to do that is not one of the best things in the world to have happen.
No.
And then the penalties, the turnovers, those are things that need to be corrected before we play good football teams. And not that we haven't played one. Boise State, I think, is an excellent football team. But we have, I think, underperformed a little bit in the first two games. And now it's the coach's job to get the players to understand the importance of the little things to take care of, and make sure that you don't beat yourself. And I think the Ducks have a lot of weapons, but you've got to allow the ball to get to those weapons. And our protection is broken down. I think we've given up, I don't know, like 6 or 7 sacks already.
I believe 6 is the number. I think it's 3 each week.
Yeah. We gave up 3 all last year. Now we had an experienced offensive line and a quarterback that didn't want to take sacks. He got rid of the ball. And that's the other thing. I think that our quarterback has to understand that throwing the ball away isn't always a bad thing. And taking the sacks and big sacks is not good for the possession of the ball.
Certainly you and I and Oregon fans out there listening to or watching this are not the only ones that see the issues that have plagued Oregon through the first couple of weeks. The penalties, the missed blocking assignments, just not being sharp, not being at their best. What piece of advice would you give to Dan Lanning going into this week as to how to emphasize that at practice?
Well, I think Coach Lanning knows exactly what he needs to emphasize in this practice, and he doesn't need my advice. I mean, like it is, it's easy for me to sit here and see what went wrong. But I also saw a lot of things that went right. And Coach Lanning has been responsible for those as well. So I think our coaching staff is well aware of what needs to be taken care of. And they don't need an old codger like me making suggestions about what they need to do.
When you look at the offensive line struggles that have happened through the first couple of weeks, talked about the sacks, but the running game I don't think has been quite as successful as it's capable of being later in the year. What do you feel like is missing from that unit? There's some turnover up there. There's a new center. There was an injury in fall camp. How impactful can those sorts of things be towards an offensive line success?
Well, you've got to get some games under your belt and some experience with everybody playing together. One of the things that I did see in the last game is the quarterback run game. Actually the quarterback ran the ball a couple of times. And I think the threat of the quarterback run game can give the offensive line a little help as well. And I would think that you may see a little more of that moving forward, even though Gabriel is not the best runner of all of the quarterbacks. The quarterback run game can take a little bit of pressure off of the offensive line. And there's been I think I saw about 2 or 3 times that we got sacked that we just turned somebody flat loose. And I don't know whether we didn't get in the right protection or the quarterback wasn't aware of where the free man was coming from. But those things I'm sure will get ironed out as well.
How easy or manageable is it to fix those sorts of issues over the course of a season?
It's a must do. And whether you win or lose, or whether you win big or not, you still have mistakes that you have to correct. And I think you saw some things that were better and some things that didn't get fixed from the first game to the second game that I'm sure moving forward will be fixed.
Well, we've still got plenty more with Coach Brooks coming up. We're going to talk about Oregon State next because it is Oregon State week. It's not how it usually feels because it's a different time of year, but we'll talk about the Beavs and that matchup coming up next. Hey, Locked On Ducks fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game I think you're going to love, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. That's right. You can actually be the head coach of the Ducks. From recruiting to play calling to coordinating scholarships and overseeing training camps, you get to do it all. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline, and everything you do impacts the future and legacy of your program. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Ducks fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, Coach, so it is Civil War week. Game is in Corvallis, where Oregon has lost each of their last two contests. It was a dominant win last year at Autzen Stadium, 31-7, but this week always has a different feel to it, and I think now it's even more unique now that the Ducks and the Beavers are not playing in the same conference for the first time, and I literally don't even know how long, and having the Civil War be a non-conference matchup is strange, to be sure, but when you were a head coach going into this game, what was, if anything, different about being at practice, getting ready?
Well, it's always different when you play your in-state rival, and certainly this rivalry has been going on longer than almost any rivalry in the country, certainly longer than any on the West Coast. And this is a game that is scary because we haven't done well against the Beavers, and like you mentioned, we've lost the last two games up there, and we need to correct some things. They're coming off of a 2-0 start. They shut out San Diego State, that normally has a good offense. I did not see that game, so I can't speak to whether San Diego State still has the weapons and they're as good a football team as they've shown in the recent years, but it's an impressive start by Oregon State, and it's a tough place to play. And it will be tougher because I'm sure there's a lot of animosity from the Beavers and the Cougars that they were left out of the revolving door on the realignment. And this is going to be a very emotional game for Oregon State. And we not only have to match that, we have to match that with execution and make sure we take care of the football.
Yeah, San Diego State's got a new head coach, so I think their offense is in a little bit of a transition year, but still going on the road and holding a team to no points, I think speaks volumes to what Trent Bray, the Beavers head coach, former defensive coordinator, has instilled on that side of the football. And when you look at this Oregon team, Rich, on paper, to a lot of people, Oregon should be able to go in and win comfortably. But that was the case each of the last couple of weeks as well. Can you remember a time when you had a team that you felt should have played at a higher level or should have beaten a team that you didn't, and kind of how you handled that as a head coach?
Yeah, like I said, 94 season, we started 1-2, and we certainly should have been no worse than 2-1, maybe 3-0. We had a good football team, but we didn't execute. We didn't do the right things we should, and you got to fix it. And I was fortunate that I had a great group of young men on that team that really dug deep and figured some things out and played more as a total team moving forward after that shaky start.
When I look at this Oregon State game, I see a team that wants to run the football, which is no surprise because you've got the defense coordinator from the previous staff. They like to run the football a lot over there in Corvallis. That's going to be the case once again this week. How have you assessed what Oregon has brought to the table defensively after last week? Ashton Jeanty was, bottled up right until he wasn't, and he was able to break some long runs against this Oregon defense. But what have you seen from Oregon's rush defense this year?
Well, I thought in the first game it was good, and the last game we know that Boise State has a great back, and they did a lot of things that kept our defense off balance. And when you give a great back an opportunity to break a tackle or two, those broken tackles can add up to a lot of yards, which they did. I can remember one run I saw him make that I think he broke about 4 tackles. Yeah. So tackling is imperative, and if you don't let them break tackles, I think the running game can be contained. If you don't, the Beavers, as we know, the last time we lost up there, I think they ran the ball. They didn't throw a pass the last quarter.
I think it was 6 completed passes on the game.
Yeah, but they didn't throw it at all in the fourth quarter. They just ran it down our throat. So I think we should expect that they want to run the ball. We know that they want to run it, and we need to make sure that they can't run it efficiently every time.
This game was brought into question as to whether it would actually exist when Oregon left for the Big Ten and Oregon State and Washington State got left behind, and they moved the Texas Tech game, who went up and they got beat badly by Washington State up in Pullman on Saturday, which was a heck of a game for the Cougs. Yeah, I mean that was a statement win for Jake Dickert and company, and I'm glad Oregon's got Oregon State on the schedule rather than Washington State. But certainly the Beavs, not a game that you can ever afford to overlook when you have the rivalry factor as well. But when this game was in doubt, Coach, not every Oregon fan felt this way, not every Oregon State fan felt this way, but I feel this way, that this game should be played every year, regardless of whether the teams are in the same conference. That's how I feel about it. What do you say?
I absolutely feel the same way. I said this when the league broke up, that you can't disregard the history of this game, the Civil War, which I know we're not supposed to call it that anymore, but it is civil war in this state. We're 40 miles apart. I've been on both sides of the rivalry. It would have been a crime to not continue this game on a yearly basis, because you need to keep some of the history that Oregon and Oregon State have had combined in and out. By the way, when I played at Oregon State, we were not a member of the conference. We were independents. They kicked us out over money. And this is another deal about money.
Boy, that sounds familiar.
So, and then Oregon State and Oregon were admitted back into the conference. So they were together then. And this is the first time, really, I think the two schools have not been together in the same conference or independent together. But it's a tradition that should not go away. It's a wonderful game. You know how much the in-state fans enjoy it, and it's just something that should happen every year.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you agree. You were a part of a lot of those games on the sideline in your time at Oregon from 1977 to 1994. Do you have a favorite matchup with the Beavs that sticks out in your head as, man, that was the best game that we played, or that was the most fun game to win?
Every game until I lost my first one. I think it was about 6 or 7 in, I think.
Do you remember which year that was?
Well, not exactly, but I don't.
Gotcha. When you look at where this Oregon team is now in the Big Ten and Oregon State in the Pac-12, which is still technically alive, I was sad to see that league go away because I grew up with it, and you've known it for even longer than I have. Back when it was the Pac-8, which was before the Arizona schools got added from the WAC, and they made it the Pac-10, and then it was the Pac-12, and now it's the Pac-12 legally speaking, but it is just a two-team conference at the moment. When Oregon announced they were going to the Big Ten, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I think at that point, Oregon was kind of up against it. The league had already started to fall apart with Colorado leaving, UCLA and SC leaving. And I think, unfortunately, Oregon did what was best for them. It's too bad that Oregon State couldn't have been included, but they weren't. And it's just a new era, and it's not over. The leagues are still going to be going through, I think, some transition in the next 4 to 5 years that could end up being as surprising and shocking as some of the things we've already seen.
Yeah, I think the advantage for Oregon being in the Big Ten is you have, quote unquote, a seat at the table at the big kids table.
That's correct.
Because those are the two, Big Ten, SEC, those are the power conferences. They're making all the decisions. They've got the most money and everything of the sort. We've still got more to get to with Coach Brooks and where the program has come since he last coached it in 1994. Stick around. First, let's talk about 5 Hour Energy, which fixes tired fast. That's why you need to go check them out. Whether you have a long list to do for work, you have some DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me and you're busy this time of year, or you have a large list of projects for the home, when you get your supplies for your project, do not forget the most essential supply, a 5 Hour Energy shot. With zero sugar, a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has a bunch of flavors as well. They have watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone, so go try them all. You can build your own 12-pack or 24-pack, and then you're off to the races and get it delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5 and hourenergy.com. To get some 5 Hour Energy, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to get 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Continuing on with Oregon legendary head coach Rich Brooks joining me here on the show. You first took over, as I've mentioned, back in 1977. Here we are in 2024. What is the biggest difference between Oregon football then and Oregon football now in your eyes?
Facilities and money. Combination of both. We had no locker room. We had no meeting rooms. Where our offices were in the Quonset hut over at Mac Court. It just is a different world, and it's a marvel to see the transition in Oregon football that has taken place. The first major thing that happened under Bill Byrne when he took over, he started making football a priority, and we did build the Casanova complex, and we were able to move into that, and that was a major statement, and that was really, at the time, we turned the corner. We went to 4 bowl games, and unfortunately, we only won one of those. But I think the fact that we invested in football made a difference and allowed us to be able to win the conference and go to the Rose Bowl in 1994. And I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't have gone to the Liberty Bowl in '89 and won that game. Not the Liberty, the Poulon Weed Eater Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana, where it was very cold. And it just is a major transition. If you look at the facilities over there now, it's hard to imagine. I mean, a lot of people that come into that stadium now don't know that the parking lot that used to be on the west side of the stadium was right up to the door where the players go into the gate. And now there's a Casanova complex, there's an indoor complex, there's the Hatfield Dowling complex, there's practice fields, and there's going to be more in the next few years. So it's just a major, major difference. And the improvement on the recruiting base, because of the national recognition that Oregon has received, would have never happened without Phil Knight and his involvement in the program.
I want to go back for a sec. You said that your teams, at least in the early going, didn't have locker rooms, didn't have meeting rooms. Where did you guys watch film? Where did you gather to talk about the week?
During fall camp, we had to get classrooms on campus to meet as a team. We met in the tunnels of Autzen Stadium on game days with blackboards and drawing the stuff on the blackboards for the players. The wind whistling down in the cold in November. We just didn't have any place to meet, and it. Wow. It's just a major difference. I mean, I don't think people can really appreciate what my staff went through to turn the program around, and the players that were there under those conditions. When they come back now, they just shake their head and say, "Oh my goodness, look at this now." I mean, it's one of the most impressive turnarounds from a facility standpoint that has probably happened in college football anywhere.
Have you had the chance to meet Coach Lanning before?
I certainly have.
What are your impressions of him?
I think he's the right guy for the job. I mean, particularly in this day of NIL and the transfer portal, he's got more energy than the Energizer Bunny. And I mean, he's always working at getting the thing right. And he's the right guy at the right time.
He's done a great job, keeping a strong recruiting base for the Ducks. Back-to-back top 10 classes, pushing for another one in the 2025 cycle. What was recruiting at Oregon like back in 1985, let's say?
Well, we didn't get 5 stars. We had to recruit close to home. We recruited a lot of Oregon players, a lot from Northern California. We did make inroads into Southern California, but they were always players that SC and UCLA did not offer. And a lot of them came up and recruited as 2 or 3 stars and ended up playing like 4 and 5 stars. And that was the difference. We were able to recruit players that loved the game of football, that worked their fannies off, and became good teammates and played for each other.
How do you think it's most different now and then?
Well, any top recruit anywhere in the country is certainly going to take a look at Oregon if Oregon's interested in them. And that was never the case in my 18 years. We couldn't even get in the front door of a top recruit.
Gotcha. Last thing for you, Coach, and then I'll let you go. I know you are big in the fishing and golfing scene out there in the state of Oregon. Any big fishing, golfing plans coming up that you're excited about?
Playing golf tomorrow.
That's a great start.
And I'm going to hit the McKenzie probably near the end of the month when the fall bite comes on with the rainbow.
Awesome. Love to hear that. Rich Brooks, legendary Oregon football coach. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, Spencer.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.